This is Modern Mindset, the show that picks the brains of the world's leading minds to help you unlock yours. I'm your host, Adam Cox, and joining me today we have Fidel Beauhill, who is a author, best-selling author and coach, and he's written a book about helping men deal with the tricky topic of divorce. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on here. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, the motivation for writing a book, because divorce is a heavy topic. And you've taken that heavy topic and you've turned it into a book, and it's aimed at men specifically. So tell us about your motivations for writing that book.
Yeah. I work with a lot of guys who have been through the divorce. My kind of like niche is working with guys in sort of middle ages. And like divorce is just one of the biggest kind of life changing points, isn't it, that we get to, and they're becoming more and more common. You know, over 50% of marriages end in divorce these days. So it's just something that's rife, that's hitting men and women, and kind of having an effect on so many of us. I'm divorced myself. The final papers actually have only come through a few months ago, which I'd almost forgotten about whilst writing the book and stuff. So we waited the 2 years. So I've been separated from my wife for 2 years. It was a very amicable divorce, but during that process, even with all of my kind of like training, my mindset work and stuff, you know, I was surprised at the impact it had on me mentally and emotionally. Like I was finding myself really low energy. I was tired. I knew I wasn't functioning at my best. It wasn't until I started actually journaling quite a bit and noting down my kind of energy levels. My mental capacity, like my cognitive ability was much lower than what it was a few months before. And that took a while to get back. And so I went searching as I do, because it's my job and that's the way that my mind works, looking for information, looking to use myself as a guinea pig, again, as I always do with everything, health and fitness and mindset and everything else like that. I test and try everything before I use it with my clients and so forth. And this was something that I was like, right, okay, this is a great process for me to examine. Let's see who's got some information. Let's see who's writing about it. Let's see who's talking about it from a male perspective. And there was literally nothing. There was a couple of books that weren't that great, but 80% of it was aimed at women. 10% of it was aimed at couples, or like focused specifically on sort of how to heal from divorce from a narcissist and stuff like that, or physical and mental abuse. And the other bit that was aimed at men was literally just sort of focused on legal and financial advice, all very Americanized as well. So there just wasn't anything out there at all. And as usual with books, I kind of like thought, well, there's a gap in the market here. So I started sort of doodling out. And then about a year ago, I had all 10 chapters kind of laid out. And yeah, I don't know. It just took a while. And then when lockdown happened, it was like, right, this book needs to come out, because I could see in my men's group and with my clients and people that wanted to work with me, and in my women's group as well, that there were a lot of couples that were going to crack under the strain of being locked up together for such a long period of time. So this is going to be needed. We have Divorce January coming up every January, the first Monday of the new year. The solicitors will report massive peaks in people filing for divorce. So the strain of Christmas, and I thought this year is going to be an absolute sort of tsunami, I think. And so this is information that needs to be out there. There's going to be a lot of guys going through this, along with the other pressures we're all feeling at the moment as well. This is going to be some needed information.
I think, we talked a little bit before we started recording on the difference between men and women. And women typically have better support networks. They're able to articulate their worries, their concerns, their emotions. What's been your experience in terms of men's equivalent of that? As men, are we pretty good at kind of talking about our emotions, or are we a bit crap?
We're not really. And also, I want to preface this by saying I'm not a massive fan of this big drive to get men to talk, because it feels to me almost like victim blaming. There's a lot of guys who just aren't used to it and don't have the vocabulary. They don't have that level of emotional connection. And in actual fact, a lot of times they don't even need to talk about everything, right? Guys tend to just manage this stuff slightly differently. What we do need to do is give men the tools to be able to balance themselves out internally using meditation and fitness and exercise and stuff like that to keep themselves mentally healthy and emotionally healthy. But I'm not sure that we have the drive. So talking is useful, as is giving guys information, because a lot of us just deal with it differently. The feminine and women in particular, like, talking is a different thing for them. So mental health services are certainly in the UK are largely designed by women because they make up the majority of people working in caring services and so forth. I spent the day going down a rabbit hole on Friday about Iceland. Fascinating country, happiest country in the world, highest divorce rate in Europe, right? Highest amount of children born to unwed mothers. It's a bit of a weird expression. So I was like, this is really, and then I saw a bit of information saying that they've also got the smallest gender gap, okay, in the world. So 50% of their parliament is made up by women. So it's like, what's going on here? How have they done this? Interestingly enough, they've got the highest rate of working women and working mothers in the workforce. But there's this massive skew. 70% of them are still working in education and social services and in the healthcare sector. So even given all of this kind of freedom, and I think it's like 60% of men are all still working in engineering, construction, and things like that. So even given all of this freedom, women are still kind of moving into the more caring professions, right, at different levels, which is interesting. And I think that kind of sums it up. There are these men and women are different. I say it quite a lot, and I get pulled up for it, but men and women are just different inherently.
It's
a
Jordan
spectrum.
Peterson that said it's the equality of choice, isn't it? So, if people can choose whatever they want and women are choosing the more caring professions, that's not a bad thing.
It's a wonderful thing, but I think it absolutely highlights that, trying to get more women into engineering, which is cool. Like, I do believe there are women that are interested in doing it. I'm not advocating that. And likewise, men getting into childcare and education and teachers, we do kind of need more people who feel drawn to that. But on a societal level, as groups, it seems, and it fits with my kind of theory and philosophy too, that men and women are going to be drawn to doing different types of stuff, which is interesting. And part of that, again, like I said, it comes down to that sort of communication, that caring, and all of that sort of stuff. And so, guys, to your original question, don't naturally form groups and friendship support networks to do that sort of stuff. We form support groups and friendships around specific tasks. So we'll have a business network, we'll have our business friends, and we'll have our training mates who we'll go train and play sport with. We'll have our drinking buddies. And none of that really, we get a lot of benefit from it, and it keeps a lot of us sane and mentally and emotionally and physically fit and healthy, right? But we don't have these places where we can go for crisis, because a lot of us will fear that, because those kind of relationships are kind of based on banter, and it's like we kind of test each other. I'll go a bit deeper on that maybe later. There's reasons for that, but we might not want to be vulnerable in those types of environments. And every now and again, when we are ready and we do want to, those support networks aren't there.
You mentioned that women tend to be the driving force behind more of the decisions to divorce.
Yeah.
To what extent does that impact men if they're on the receiving end of, let's say, a divorce decision rather than the instigator of a divorce decision?
Yeah, it's bad news for most guys, for sure. And for women, it's bad news for men, women, and kids, right? When we get this balance wrong, it's bad news for everybody involved, I think. So it's nearly 70%. I think it's 67.9% of divorces are filed by women. Listen, the reasons for that are possibly endless. If we look at the reasons for divorce, there's loads of women will cite, abuse or adultery and all of this sort of stuff. And that could well be true, but I think in my experience, guys tend to kind of know that divorce is on the cards or that they're in a rubbish relationship, but they bury their head in the sand. And men are much more capable of sitting in a rubbish relationship through fear, for various different reasons, through fear of kind of like ending it. Whereas women are just going to be less tolerant of that, especially modern women, going to be just less tolerant of it. And when they decide to take action, again, my philosophy, not just mine, but it's getting more and more widely kind of accepted now that there's a polarity dynamic there of masculine and feminine energy. We Men and women have a mix of both within them. My assertion would be that more men have a higher amount of masculine energy, more women have a higher amount of feminine energy within them. What we find attractive in each other is to balance that out. So we look for that polarity. The masculine is the one that provides the safety and security. That has to come from a position of trust. So the feminine is going to have to trust that if you're going to lead any kind of process or the relationship. And I think in our generation specifically, there's been a massive flip. It's a very specific generational flip for us because we've seen the biggest amount of change between gender roles in our lifetime. It's been huge. Needed to happen, absolutely, but it's caused problems in different places, and this is one of them. So you tend to find that a lot of modern women are leading the relationship because guys don't know how to do it. Our only model of leading a relationship from our parents and grandparents, and that was slightly different. That was done with money because men largely were the ones that went out and worked. We don't have that quite often. We have more equality in terms of earning power and potential, and so we kind of relinquished the lanes and quite the reins. Quite often, men are quite passive, play a passive part in the emotional element of their marriage. And so if they're taking that passive role in a divorce, women are going to seek that safety and security, and they're going to create it themselves. So they're going to seek it for themselves, and they're going to seek it for the children. And that can quite end up with men being shafted financially and not being able to see their kids, not spending time with their children. Because if they step into that passive role, once that starts happening, they slip even further into this kind of victim state and victim mentality, which I see a lot. I have a big men's group, and I see that a lot. Guys going, oh, it's the system. Oh, women are awful. The system's all stacked against us and everything else like that. And I think that could all be changed if they actually had stepped into that leadership role earlier on, either in their relationship or certainly stepped into it during the divorce proceedings and provided some safety and security, a safe container that their partner or ex-partner actually allowed you to do it and made them feel a lot safer of your capabilities to treat them well and look after the kids and look after them. I think that would change it quite a lot.
Mm. One of the most high-profile separations that attracted so much media attention was the Gwyneth Paltrow separation, where they described it as conscious uncoupling.
Yeah. I really like that phrase. Everyone kind of
it was ridiculed at the time, but I think as time passes, they kind of think, well, hold on a minute. If two adults kind of figure out that the relationship isn't working anymore, and they decide that they do want to go their separate ways, but still do what's right for the children, that sounds like a good plan to me. Why do you think it was ridiculed, and what can we learn from that kind of celebrity breakup?
I think whenever celebrities come out and use kind of new phrases, it makes great press. And do you know what? You'll get this, like the kind of our group unconscious. We like to stay the same, right? People like the same. Whenever new stuff comes along, we fear it, don't we? Because we don't know what's over there. So we like to keep things the same. So when somebody comes up with a new concept, lots of people are just like, oh, no, that doesn't work. Let's laugh at it. Let's ridicule it. But conscious uncoupling, that's the perfect phrase for me. That's exactly what we should be doing. And unfortunately, what we tend to do is lots of unconscious uncoupling, where we don't really know the whys and the wherefores. And then our inner children come out and have massive bun fights. Everybody's seeking safety and security and seeing the other one as the enemy. And it turns into a massive war zone, man, with our kids in the middle of it. And it's sad. sad for absolutely everybody involved. So yeah, we need to be a lot more conscious about the way we're splitting up. And like I said, we still see it, unfortunately, here in the UK and in the US, divorce as being this kind of failure, and so therefore blame needs to be apportioned. um People naturally don't want to take responsibility for things like that, because then it adds to their sense of failure, not being good enough, and all the other limiting beliefs that they might have. And so if we focus on it, one of the kindest and best things my ex-wife said to me during this process, I said that to her, so I feel like a bit of a failure at this now. And she was just like, nah, man, our marriage was not a failure. We spent 15 years together, 10 of them married. We both had a child from previous relationships, and we had one together. And we created a beautiful family where we parented our stepchildren amazingly. Our stepchildren have got brothers and sisters, and our kids, they're all kind of like friends. We created this, we had 15 amazing years. And we consciously chose to end the marriage before one of us cheated, or before we started hating or resenting each other too much. And actually that makes it a success. There's a phrase, I can't remember, the French lady, Belgian she is, Esther Perel, said, we need to stop looking at relationships or grading relationships based on the amount of time, the length of time they are. That's not the only marker of whether a relationship is success or a failure. The quality of the relationship is, and how we choose to end it is a much higher marker of the success of a relationship.
And you're right, there is this kind of narrative, kind of propagated by things like anniversaries. It's kind of like, well, how long has your marriage lasted? Okay, congratulations. It's this kind of element of time is the biggest kind of metric of success in a relationship. And this narrative of it being a failure if it ends. We don't look at a mobile phone contract as, well, I failed with iPhone. We think, right, well, I've had that time. It was a great 2 years, but there's a different kind of dynamic going on now.
Yeah.
Why do you think in lots of other areas like employment, there used to be a perspective that you have a job for your entire life.
Yeah.
And now the perspective is, well, you have multiple careers, you have multiple sources of income. And we've been very adaptable at changing the narrative and the way in which we classify other areas of our life. Why do you think it's been so slow to kind of change how we evaluate and kind of compartmentalize relationships?
We live in a capitalist world. And so really underpinning all of this stuff, really, it largely derives on kind of like the markets. So romance, the concept of romance has only been around a few hundred years. It blew my mind when I first realized this, when I first learned it. I think it was the first kind of mention of the concept of romantic love was in a French book about 400 years ago, which in the scale of human existence is a tiny, tiny, tiny pinprick. So this is not a natural thing. This is something, and it still doesn't exist in large parts of the world. Like, they just don't buy into it. It's an American concept, Western European concept that's worth billions of dollars. Billions and billions. Just think about the romance industry, the movies, the cards, the flowers, diamond rings, the Boers infamous thing of the engagement ring and everything else like that. Marriage is shown to be kind of good for the economy, because when especially from a male perspective, when men are in a marriage for long term, they feel the need to go out and work and earn more than they need. Okay, because then we can pass it down to our kids, and we will want the sofa. We want to keep up with the Joneses. We'll want to provide and everything else like that. We're good providers. We're less likely to break the law. We're less likely to evade taxes. We're less likely, we're much more likely to stay on our jobs, pay our bills, do what we're told, like good civilians, right? We're just much more like that. Single blokes, right? Single males that are out there are much more likely to cause a problem. They're much more likely to have strong opinions. They're much more likely to go out and fight injustice. They're much more likely. unfortunately, to kind of like commit crime and live outside of the law, and stuff like that. So actually, long-term marriage is really good for a capitalist society. So that's why it's always going to be encouraged by government. Okay, so there's tax breaks and everything else like that for people who are married. So along with that, is going to be a societal element that says we all need to stay together for as long as possible, right? Because we all stay in our little boxes and we're all well behaved at that point. So once we figure out how we can all make a bit more money and we can deal with the tax breaks and stuff like that, it'll probably follow the fact that we're all changing and it's happening, and so people will figure out how to make money out of it, and then at that point it will become more socially acceptable, I believe.
Yeah, you're right. It's a strange dynamic, but the institution of marriage, family, it's a narrative of, if you ask a child, what does their future look like? Study, get a job, get in a relationship, get married, have children. It's that kind of story arc for most people's kind of projected blueprint of their lives.
Yep.
And when that changes, that can, I guess, feel like the Disney story that was kind of planned for them hasn't really gone to plan, and then they feel the failure.
Yep.
You mentioned failure as an emotion there. To what extent are other emotions creeping into the mix when people separate or get divorced? Things like shame, guilt, things like that. What are the dominant emotions that come up, and to what extent do they impact particularly men?
All of those. Guilt is a massive one. Yeah, guilt is a massive one, because we're told, leaving your family. Like, who are you as a man if you're not providing for your family? Uh, fear of spending the rest of your life alone. Men don't do that well on their own, unless they really learn how to. Lots of men jump from one relationship to another. A lot of relationships end because the guy can feel it ending, so he'll self-sabotage it by going out and having an affair or finding a new relationship, so he can just move swiftly into something else. So that will come with a load of guilt. Yeah, and there still is that kind of societal pressure around it, isn't there? Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of fear, because you've got there's a biological thing as well, as you'll know. Our neurology is there. We have our neurological pathways. If you're in a relationship, this is a funny thing I found. Like 15 years in a long-term relationship, every single decision and choice that you make, everything you do, your brain runs a little pathway that goes, how's that going to affect the person that I'm married to, right? If I go out for another couple of beers, if I eat this sandwich, if I take this route home, I'm going to be late. How's that going to affect it? Everything you do, every single little choice, there's a little bit of your brain that goes, how's it going to affect her? When she's not there anymore, your brain has got to like literally carve, like it's actually really difficult to do, because you start going, what? I don't have to, it doesn't, my decisions don't affect anyone else. Like literally, I just have to think about me, the kids, yeah, but it's a different kind of process. So we have to lay down and that's, to our unconscious mind, doesn't want to do that. The monkeys don't like that, do they? It's like, no, we've got to change the way we think. It's a big deal. So it'll create fear and anxiety. Your unconscious will create these fears and anxieties around that, because it can feel the change that's going to happen, and it's big, not to be underestimated.
And I guess the fear of the unknown as well, because once you've had a relationship for a certain period of time, I guess there's so many unknown variables about what the future looks like. At the moment, let's say a separation or a divorce is instigated. What do men do to kind of cope with the fear of the unknown in your experience?
Well, I help them with that, and that's where my kind of like process really it hit me a couple of weeks after I'd moved out. So I'm quite a big advocate of kind of having a long-term vision of where your life is. Like you can attach, because mainly we get it round the wrong way round. People just set arbitrary goals without them necessarily thinking about where it is they want to be in 10 years time. And especially as men, we wake up, that's what a midlife crisis, we wake up at the age of 40 or whatever and go, how did I get here? Because we didn't plan it necessarily, not consciously anyway. So my process goes values, vision, goals. What's important to me? Where am I heading? Okay, now how am I going to get there? So we have to examine our values, because they'll change. And I had a vision. I like to draw them out. And I had a vision. I looked at it and I was like, how much of that is actually me? It wasn't. It was a big house out in the country with stables, big 4x4 and all of this. And this is like, I don't like horses. I'm a city boy. I don't like living in the country. I don't even like suburbs. Like I want to live in. Why have I got all of this stuff? This is what everything in my life was focused on, providing this stuff for other people. Okay, so now I don't have to do that anymore. Who am I? What is important to me? Where do I want to go? When you ask somebody what it is they want, what do you want? You see their brains just go, what? Especially blokes. They're just like, what do you mean? What I want? And they'll do what they want, and they'll exhibit selfish behavior, right? But it will be unconscious. Like they'll just be escaping. It will be too much beer. They'll play on their PlayStation. They'll get called selfish, but it's not selfish in that positive way. It's not consciously selfish. They don't know what they want. They know what they don't want. They know what they want to escape from, but they don't know what they actually want. And it's a really interesting process to discover that. One of the problems with it, men and women, is that what they'll then do is they'll go back to their last point of reference of when they were single. So if they've been married for 20 years, they'll go back to being 20 again. And that's when they stay up all night watching PlayStation, watching porn, down the pub, taking drugs again, going raving. You'll see them all in there, the 40-year-old ravers, like, and doing whatever it was they were doing, because they were like, right, that's who the last time I knew who I was as an individual was then. So let me go back there and try and find myself again. That can cause also, because you're not that guy anymore. 15 years, 20 years of marriage and being in a relationship and getting older and working and wiser has changed you. That's not who you are anymore. This process as this part of your life has created a new person. You're a new person, and you get to pick again. Now you're not part of a relationship. Now it's just you. You kind of get to, this is the exciting part of why I love working with men in this, because it's like, here's your opportunity.
Yeah. Because there's two ways of looking at it, isn't there? One is to kind of regress back to who you were like 15, 20 years ago. And the second is, well, knowing what I now know and knowing what's important to me now, values, vision, what do I now want to do with all this extra knowledge and resources that I have right now?
Yeah.
So would you say that divorce can be, rather than only perceived as a failure, can be an opportunity, could be a fresh start, could be a new
massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity to do that work on yourself, to sit there and take stock of all of this stuff. And I think as long as you don't get distracted because it's turned into a war, which is why I'm such an advocate of, amicable divorces and doing what you can to kind of minimize the stress, because it's a massive distraction from what could be a real beautiful opportunity for you and your ex, to do this kind of work and discover who you are, create a whole new life, whole new business, whole new career. Where are you going to live? Look at all these things you get to choose now. You get to redesign your life. You get a second bite of the cherry, but like you said, with all this wisdom, with all this experience, hopefully with some resources as well, and freedom. Like I have my youngest daughter every other week, so I have her for a week, but every other week until COVID struck, it was like, right, great, I can get on a plane. I've designed my business so that I can do it from anywhere in the world. So now every other week I can just jump on a plane. I can go and sit in Spain. I can go and sit wherever, get an Airbnb. Life is great. I can go and explore. I can do more discovery about what it is I know, like, and enjoy doing. What a brilliant time of life. And we're at our peak, man. We're in our 40s.
Absolutely. So there's someone that I know that I work with recently, and you're right, it was the female that instigated the divorce. So it was kind of he discussed it, kind of knew it was coming, but didn't really do anything about it.
Yeah.
Suddenly, divorce papers are kind of submitted, and then his reaction is, right, first of all, deal with the crisis, and then secondly, it's kind of like effectively restore that confidence. So, from his point of view, his goal now is, right, get a nice car and get a hot woman that's hotter than his previous partner. These are the two priorities. Is this typical in men purely to kind of protect the ego?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, it is. And again, it's those goals that he had before. It's the same thing as regressing, right? What did I want when I was 20? I know I wanted a hot woman and a sports car. All right, that's kind of what the midlife crisis is. It's like, who am I? Oh, I remember him. That's the dude. That was when I was a bloke. That was when I was alpha. That was when I was in my most bloody masculine energy, freedom, puffing my chest out, cock of the walk. Like, what was interesting to me then? Oh, I know. Do you know what I mean? Hot chicks and sports cars, like, and don't get me wrong, like, it can be a fun little part of the process. I did it consciously. And I had a great time, and there's nothing wrong with it, with kind of getting that kind of stuff out of your system. There's a great, well, especially for a lot of guys and women as well, long-term marriage often means unsatisfying sex, or long periods without having any. So one of the first things most people want to do when they get out is go and get laid, right? Go and experience different kind of sexuality and that bit of exploration, which is cool, especially nowadays, because things like Tinder and all of that weren't around the last time we were single. So that makes life, that sort of stuff. It's just about being aware of what you're doing. It's all about the conscious, isn't it? It's being aware of what you're doing, giving yourself kind of an amount of time to do that and explore that, and just make sure you're still focused on your values. What is actually important to you? Is this distracting you from it? Where do you want to end up in 10 years time? Because going and getting a hot 23-year-old and a Ferrari probably ain't going to get you there.
Yeah. You mentioned amicable divorce, how a relationship ends kind of can define overall the quality of that relationship. And I guess if there's children involved, can make a massive difference in terms of future co-parenting if it's kind of done in an amicable way. What would be your advice to men going through a separation, going through a divorce, so that things, if they are going to end, are going to end on the best possible terms?
So there's a few concepts. I mean, I did, just before we did this, I did an interview on my podcast earlier with a lady called Caroline Strawson, and we spoke a couple of months ago about this concept of co-parenting. So one phrase, I wrote a chapter about it in the book, one phrase that struck out to me, I listened to a podcast, it was aimed at women, and she said, put your children in the center of your divorce, not in the middle. And that phrase just stuck with me, and I gave it to my ex-wife, and I was like, this is what we've got to do. Okay, so rather than using children as a pawns in a battle, like, every decision that we make, is this best for the kids? That's question number one. Is this what's best for the kids? Because everybody kind of wants that, and that's a commonality you will share. And if you're both focused on that and you're both agreed on that, right, and that those are two things that both parents will want to do, and so you can start from there. The other concept we were talking about is co-parenting, which is the phrase you used, and I think that's the kind of this holy grail, I think, and I'm not sure how helpful that is. What we were talking about was parallel parenting. So if your divorce process is messy and you don't, one of you's cheated, or one, you're hating each other, this idea that you've still got to maintain like these false lines of communication and stuff like that, and try and pretend to be friends, and going around like dropping off in the doorsteps and holding eye contact and all these things, weird things that I've seen advised. Actually, do you know what? Like, let's just leave each other alone to parent. Like, you're both adults, you're both parents, you're both capable. You go over there when they're with you. I'm not going to question it, and I'm going to try and control it. Just do your thing. I'm over here. Here's one phone number that you can call. Here's my email address I've set up separately for this. If there's an emergency, ring me. Other than that, we don't have to talk. We have to trust each other. And this is a real option. And it's a concept I've been kind of mulling over for the last few months, and it's something that I'm going to be talking about a lot more. So I think it's really, really useful. I think it's unhelpful having two people with massive open lines of communication, usually via text message on various different platforms and stuff like that, trying to still be involved in each other's lives, and it just gets really messy. And it's no good for the kids. The kids can tell. And what are you teaching them on an unconscious level when you're doing this sort of stuff? I think it's unhealthy. The best way, like the whole premise of my book is about guys stepping into their masculine energy and leading their family through this process. I think one of the reasons why a lot of marriages end is because men have dropped out of that leadership role within their families. Don't get the concept of leadership twisted. Leadership is done with kindness, consideration, and love. All right. It's not about domination. It's not about control. It's not about being in charge. It's about consciously, kindly, and considerately leading your family through a really delicate process. And if you can step up and do that in your positive masculine energy and could provide a safe container for your kids and your soon-to-be ex-wife, things will end up a lot better. And that's the kind of the basis of my book, is showing guys how to do that properly, and how to manage themselves so that they're in an emotional and mental fit state to be able to do that, and not bring all of their rubbish to the dynamic.
Absolutely. Let's say that someone like this person I work with is on the receiving end of like a surprise, quote unquote, surprise divorce. What's something on the horizon that they need to be thinking more about? Because you're right, you know, a lot of men are naturally going to be thinking about the finances. They're going to be thinking about, let's say, access to children and things like that. But is there a different area that they really need to be thinking about more, that they need to prepare more or think more about to kind of help go through the process with, you know, let's say less stress, less anxiety?
Yeah, they need to think about themselves. You know, how to reduce that fear, how to communicate from not an emotional state. So kind of like responding to messages and emails and stuff like that immediately, taking a breather, not doing things for 24 hours, only communicating from a place of calm. So do whatever you need to do to be in that state as much as possible. Now's the time to incorporate loads of healthy, positive habits. Now's the time to get running, to get to the gym, to lift some weights, to create those positive male bonds with your friends. Seek out a support group of like-minded guys. Do talk to somebody, even if you don't want to talk about that. Just having somewhere where you can let off steam, so that you're not doing it in that container over there. All right, get rid of all your stuff elsewhere. And then when you come to the communication, when you come to addressing it, we can provide that safe and secure container. Do not be reactive, like, because as we spoke off air, women are going to be more kind of like volatile and emotional through this process, more than likely. And so what you mustn't do, and this is even if you're in a relationship, what men mustn't do is jump on a woman's emotional roller coaster, right? They experience, from a biological perspective, their monthly cycles and everything else like that, they experience a lot more internal emotions and sort of shifts and changes in their moods and emotions than men do. We're fairly steady. We have testosterone spikes, which might make us get kind of angry, and the opposite, and the dumps of that, which will make us get sad. But apart from that, you know, we can be fairly emotionally steady if our external world is pretty cool. So we don't know what happens. And then sometimes what we do is, when women are being emotional towards us or around us, we jump on it with them, and that is not going to help them to feel safe and secure. And that's our task, right? To help women feel safe and secure in our presence and trust us, right? So don't lie. If you've got a new woman or you're doing something like that, I mean, breaking trust and women in your life not believing you can't provide a safe and secure container for that. So learning how to own your stuff and how to speak frankly and speak your truth is really important. And although you might get an immediate backlash, women are always going to respect you more if you're upfront and honest about stuff. Don't do it out of spite. Don't go out with the 23-year-old hot girl and take a selfie of yourself and stick it all over social media because you know it's going to get back to her. That's spiteful. Don't drop into that type of behavior. But do have respect and say, look, you know, I wanted to tell you before the kids and everything else like that, before I put it on social media, that I am seeing somebody. All those sort of things, you know, that for me is what I would consider to be positive masculinity. It's like owning yourself, owning your truth, being honest, being upfront, come up with a plan for the divorce, have a vision of how you want it to end up, and present that to your ex and go, look, this is my hope. This is where I want it to go. This is how I think we can do it. All right. I know that we're going to struggle with this. I know we're going to hit lumps and bumps, but both of us are going to be focused on doing the best for the kids. Here's what I'm doing. I'm speaking to a solicitor. I'm speaking to a financial advisor. I suggest that you go and do the same, and hopefully we can talk about this in a in a civil way. If you start to see someone, please tell me. I'm not going to react, but I'd like to know so that we can address it with the kids together. I will offer you the same courtesy if that's what I'm going to do. So you don't have to give them the ins and outs of your private life, but certainly if anything serious is going on, your partner should be the first to know. And stuff like that. Just bring that whole new level of masculine communication to the table, I think.
Yeah, it does sound like communication is a key part of that kind of, choppy road ahead.
Yes.
If someone was to, let's say, read only one chapter in your new book, what chapter would you recommend so they can get the biggest impact from that particular bit?
It's the first chapter, and it talks about that. It is just giving guys that concept of how to step into that leadership role within a relationship. And I think whether you're married or going through a divorce, this stuff is gold. I've worked with dozens of clients, not just me, my mentors and the people that I've worked with, all of their hundreds and thousands of combined clients. When we talk about bringing this dynamic, this masculine, feminine polarity dynamic into a relationship, things end much better. Things go much better when you've got that dynamic in play, and it's never too late to start introducing that. But when you do it, it has to be done with love. It has to be done with consideration, and it has to be done with kindness.
And if someone's listening right now and they're going through a divorce and it's all very stressful, maybe confrontational, legal bills are kind of mounting up, what would be your kind of message of hope to them so that they can kind of see the light at the end of that tunnel?
It will end. This is a point in time. It's part of your life. You're going to grow out of it, and you've got an exciting future ahead of you. No matter what, you know what? Even if you walk away with absolutely nothing, ground zero, she takes absolutely everything off of you. It's an opportunity. I would also say, fight for your kids. Fight for your kids, man. Don't drop that fight. Fight for your kids. Get court orders and stuff like that in place as soon as possible. Create a kind of framework and a skeleton. Listen, I know of many, 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 many examples of court orders being broken, but at least you've got a kind of starting point. Fight for your kids, because I think if anything's gonna, the biggest impact I've seen on men mentally, emotionally, draining and feeling failure, guilt, all of that stuff mainly comes from the relationship with the kids. And if you can keep it positive, which is tough, like, just keep on fighting, just keep on being there. When I split up with my eldest daughter's mum, it was a nightmare for like 7 years, but I just showed up. I drove down there one weekend every single month. I drove from Bristol to Bedfordshire. Even when I was living in Spain, I flew back every month. Sometimes I had to sleep in a car. Sometimes I didn't get to see her. Sometimes all of this stuff happened. I dealt with messages, text messages, phone calls, all of that stuff. But I just showed up. I did not stop. And my daughter knew that. And now we have a fantastic relationship. We're really, really close. In the end, when she met somebody else, had another child, all of that stopped. Now she's great. I have a great relationship with her. And it's all cool because I just showed up. I did not stop, and I didn't respond. I might have done a bit, but like overall, my tact was, you know what? I'm just going to be consistent here. I'm not going to rise to it. I'm just going to be consistent. I'm going to ignore all the rubbish. I'm going to communicate as well and as cleanly as I can. And it's all just going to be focused on my daughter. And it all worked out in the end. And now, you know what? During that time, it felt like forever, but I don't really even think about it now. She's 16 now, and I see her all the time, and we chat, and it was absolutely worth it. I could have easily walked away. But I'm so glad I didn't. And I think a lot of the guys that I talk with and listen to feel the same.
Absolutely. So if someone's listening and they want to check out your book, where's the best place for them to find that?
It's available on Amazon at the moment. Divorce: The Modern Man's Guide. If you just put Fidel Beauhill into the search category, it will come up. At the moment, I believe until this weekend, it's available on Kindle for 99p or $9.99 for the paperback version.
So check it out. Fidel, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me, mate. It's been a good conversation.
Great stuff. And to you at home, thanks for joining me on Modern Mindset. See you again soon for more.